Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the video. And today we're going to be talking about the Viltrox RF 1.8 85mm lens that they just put out for the EOS R system. Throughout the video, I'm going to show you photo samples that I took with this lens, as well as some video samples. And we're going to talk about and discuss who I think this lens is truly geared towards. All right, so anyone who's been on the EOS R platform knows that for the longest time, the only lenses that you really had access to were the ones that Canon put out. There weren't many third-party options. Now, up until Viltrox released this 85, the only other 85s you could get were from Samyang and Rokinon, and for Yamyo. Beyond that, you either had to get the $600 Canon macro 85mm, or you had to get their almost $3,000 85mm. Now, it's really good to see a company like Viltrox put a lens out on this platform, because over the last 2 years or so, Viltrox has really started to make a name for themselves in the mirrorless market. They've been putting out lenses for the Nikons, for the Sonys, for your Canon M50 series, which were absolutely great lenses for that system. And now we finally get to see their first offering in the 85mm 1.8. Now, this lens comes in at $399, which is an absolutely great starting point for an 85mm prime lens, and absolutely undercuts its next closest competition by a few $100s. Now, my first thoughts on this lens right out of the box was that it was a much heavier duty lens than I expected it to be. At $399, you never know what you're going to get. But opening this up, I found that it's a nice constructed metal design. It's got weight to it. It doesn't feel like a cheap lens at all. The glass front element absolutely looks huge compared to the rest of the camera, since they did a slimline approach to the lens design. The autofocus switch is clicky and very tactile, and the focus ring feels extremely smooth when turning. Now, some things to note about this lens and why it's at the $399 price point. It doesn't have weather sealing. So please don't take this out in the rain or in the snow or anything like that without being extremely careful with it, because you can get water into the body of your camera since they did not put a rubber O-ring on this unit. It also does not have in-body stabilization for the lens. So if you're on one of the Canon EOS R system cameras, like the EOS R or the RP, that do not have in-body stabilization, keep that in mind when shooting with this lens. Now, both of these things are something that most photographers can work around with no problems at all, and by removing them, Viltrox was able to get a much better priced item out there in the market for people to start off with. Now, if you're watching this video because you just purchased this lens or you are about to, please make sure to go to Viltrox's website and download the new firmware update that they already put out for this lens. It fixes one of the issues people were having with this lens, which was the autofocus going crazy when the self-timer was on. That has been resolved with this firmware update. They also did some tweaking on the autofocus to make the autofocus a little bit better. Now, me personally, I didn't have any issues with the autofocus before the firmware, and since I've been using it after the firmware update, I've absolutely had no autofocus issues in any of the cases that I've used it in. Now, with the included USB-C port on the lens, Viltrox has made this lens super easy to upgrade, and I will put a link either in my description or down in my comments so that you guys can get to the firmware directly. All right, once I started using this lens, I was absolutely blown away with the images that I was getting from it. They're just as good, if not better, than the other 85mm that I use, which is the Samyang, that runs about $600 to $700. The images that you get from this lens are tack sharp all the way down to 1.8 in the center, and the bokeh at 1.8 is extremely appealing. Once you stop up to something like 4.0 or 8.0, the sharpness gets even better. At 1.8, I noticed a little bit of vignetting in the corners, but it seems like going up to 2.8 took most of this away in combination with the corrections that Lightroom was able to apply to my photos. At 4.0 and above, you don't get any of the vignetting and it stays sharp throughout the corners. Now, one of the things that I noticed about this lens is that my camera actually reads it as an EF85. Once you get it into Lightroom, Lightroom actually reads it more specifically as a Canon EF85, and that's how it bases its corrections on. The corrections that Lightroom does seem great for the profile. I would like to see down the road if there ends up being a Viltrox specific profile added into Lightroom, just if it does anything that much more difference. Now, the biggest question is, who is this lens meant for? As much as you might not like this answer, I'm going to say I think it's meant for everybody. All the way down to beginner and up to pro, I think there is a use case for this type of lens. As someone getting into photography, it's an absolutely great entry point lens at $399 that you can use to get stunning portrait photography, product photography, headshots, parties, weddings, whatever it is you want to start using this lens for. As you start working your way up the ladder to intermediate and pro, it's a great inexpensive alternative to have to put on your camera body to take out in cases where you're not too worried about the lens getting messed up, but you still want to get a, really good photo out of it. Now, the video on this lens remains just as sharp. This is an absolute great lens if you're going to be shooting B-roll or any type of cinematic style footage, and you want a nice focus on your subject as well as a nice creamy bokeh. Now, for someone like me who doesn't really shoot in bad weather, I really wish this lens would have come out before the Samyang did, as this would have been my purchase over that one after seeing the results of the lens. After being able to use this lens for a couple of weeks, I absolutely recommend this for anyone on the EOS R platform if you don't already have an 85mm lens. Even if down the road you plan on buying the Canon 85L lens, I would still recommend this to have in your kit until you get that lens. This is going to be a good bridge lens to tide you over before spending that money on that specific 85, because that's money that you could potentially spend on a different lens in your kit that you don't have, that you can't get in a secondary market, like a 24-70 or something like that. Now, those are my thoughts on this Viltrox 85 RF lens. If you guys have any questions at all, please post down in the comments section. I'll be glad to answer anything that I can. If you're interested in this lens, I'm going to put links down in my description. That way you have links no matter what part of the world you're from to be able to find and purchase this lens from Viltrox. If you like this video and found it useful, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up button, as it helps the channel greatly. Also, if you liked this video and want to see more camera tech, technology, and technology news videos, please consider subscribing to the channel and hitting that bell icon. That way you get notifications anytime I put out a new video. All right, guys, that's going to wrap this up. And as always, thank you for watching the video, and until next time.